All right, so let's jump right in. When we think of history, our minds usually go to kings and queens, big wars, and sprawling empires. But what about the time before all that? The really, really deep past. Today, we're going to put on our detective hats and figure out exactly how we piece together a story that has no words.
And that's the central mystery, isn't it? I mean, if there are no books, no letters, no diaries to read, how on earth can we possibly know what happened? It sounds kind of impossible, but this is exactly where the real detective work of history kicks in.
And this is where the scale of the problem just hits you. Our story as hominids, that's creatures that walk upright, goes back 4 million years. But writing, the main tool we use to understand the past, has only been around for about 5,000 years. That's not a gap, that's a gigantic canyon in the historical record.
So what that really means is that this huge chunk of time, what we call prehistory, makes up almost the entire human experience. If we really want to understand who we are, we have to find a way to shine a light into that darkness. And we have to do it without the comfort of any written records to guide us.
This is what makes it, truly, history's greatest mystery. We're not just trying to solve a single event here. We're trying to crack the entire origin story of humanity. So where do you even begin? Well, you start with a process.
Now, the official term for this process is historiography. It sounds a little complex, I know, but you can basically think of it as the set of rules for our investigation. It's like the forensic science of the past, and it demands a super careful, super critical look at every single piece of evidence we find.
And just like any good investigation, you need a top-notch team. History isn't solved by one person sitting alone in a dusty library. It takes a whole crew of specialists, all with different skills.
So who's on this investigative dream team? Of course, you've got your historians and archaeologists right on the front lines. But then look who else gets called in on the case. Linguists who can trace how languages evolved, geneticists who can literally map our ancestral DNA, and even physicists who help figure out exactly how old things are. It's a true team effort.
And their shared mission isn't just about finding old stuff. It's about taking all those different pieces of information and weaving them together into a story that makes sense, an explanation of how our ancestors actually lived their lives.
So let's talk about the evidence itself. Since there aren't any written documents, our detectives have to rely on the things our ancestors left behind. These are the clues that help crack the case.
And we call these clues artifacts. An artifact can be anything, really. A simple stone tool, a piece of pottery, an ancient carving. Each one is like a message from the past, a physical clue left right at the scene, just waiting to be interpreted.
Which is a fair question. You might look at a little broken piece of a clay pot and think, so what? What's the big deal? But to a trained eye, that simple object is an absolute treasure trove of information.
An artifact can tell us so much. The materials it's made from tell us about the local environment and maybe even trade routes. The design can reveal things about cultural beliefs and artistic skills. And the wear and tear on it, that can tell us how people actually used it day to day. These objects are the silent storytellers of prehistory.
But an artifact alone isn't enough. The context, the scene of the crime is just as important. In history, that scene is the landscape itself. Geography is kind of like the silent witness that shapes every single part of the human story.
And its influence is just profound. The climate alone can determine if you eat or starve. A mountain range could be a fortress that protects your culture, or it could be a prison that isolates it. Access to water? Well, that's the difference between being a small village and becoming a thriving civilization. And your location on the map can decide whether you live in peace or you're constantly fighting off invaders. This is why context is absolutely everything. Finding a spearhead is interesting, sure. But finding that same spearhead in a mountain pass and dating it to a specific ice age, now that tells you a story about migration, survival, and technology. The what is almost nothing without the where and when.
Okay, so we've got our detectives, we've got our clues, and we've got the context of the scene. So how do we put it all together to build a case to actually write the story of our past? So how is the case built? Well, it's a careful, deliberate process. Our team of detectives brings all these different perspectives and uses a ton of different tools, everything from shovels to DNA sequencers, and most importantly, they are constantly criticizing and challenging each other's findings. This is not about one person having a single brilliant idea. It's a really rigorous debate. And this is how we get a reliable picture of the past. It's basically a self-correcting system. A geneticist's findings might totally challenge an archaeologist's theory, and that forces them both to go back and re-examine the evidence. It's through this teamwork and this critical analysis that a credible, solid story of our shared history finally emerges from the mist.
So as we wrap this up, it's just amazing to think that our hominid story is 4 million years old. We've uncovered so much, but there are countless mysteries still out there, buried under layers of earth and time. Which really makes you wonder, what incredible secrets about who we are just waiting for the next generation of detectives to find?